When tracing is enabled, your application will automatically gather information about every request it receives. This information can be extremely useful when analyzing your application's performance or trying to determine the source of an error. Note that the trace constant is completely unrelated to the tracing features you will use in this lesson. The tracing features will work regardless of whether the trace constant is present or not. You learned about the trace constant in Lesson 5.3. To begin this lesson, open the Mathland project from your Sample Files folder. You're now going to enable tracing on the primes.aspx page. Open primes.aspx in Design View click the drop-down menu in the Properties window and select Document. Now set the Trace property to True. Tracing is now enabled on this page. You'll also notice the Trace Mode property. The Trace Mode property simply controls how the tracing information is sorted, either by category or by time. If you don't set this property, the information will be sorted by category. Now let's view the new tracing information. View primes.aspx in your web browser. Now scroll down to the bottom of the page, and you can see a huge amount of information. This information includes everything from the information that the user sent to the server to the time it took for each method to execute. Close your web browser now and return to Visual Studio. You're now going to enable tracing for the entire application. Open web.config and add the following code inside the system.web tag. Trace enabled equals true. Page output equals true. Local only equals true. Request limit equals 10. This tag enables tracing for your entire application. The page output property enables the tracing information to appear on the pages, as you saw in the previous step. Setting local only to true means that tracing will only be enabled when using the application from the local web server. It won't be visible to users on the Internet. Finally, the request limit property limits the number of requests that are stored in the trace log. In this case, only the last 10 requests will be logged. Note that you can also set the Write to Diagnostics trace property when adding the trace tag to your web.config file. If you do this, all tracing information will be automatically sent to the system.diagnostics.trace class. You learned about the trace class in Lesson 5.8. You can then add a listener to save the information to a file. You learned about listeners in Lesson 5.9. Now view default.aspx in your web browser. Tracing information appears at the bottom of the screen, and will now appear for every page in the application. While this is useful, it only displays information about your own requests, and only the request you made for this page. It would be more useful if you could see every request that has been logged. You can do this using the Trace Viewer tool. Using your web browser's address bar, navigate to trace.axd in the root of your web application. The Trace Viewer tool appears. Trace.axd is only available if tracing is enabled. The Trace Viewer shows you that your web browser actually sent 3 requests to the web server. Note that you may also see another request for favicon.ico, but Internet Explorer doesn't always send this request. You can view the full details of each request by clicking the View Details links. By using the page.trace object, you can add your own custom information to the trace. This is useful when you want to mark specific areas of code or check time intervals. To add information to the trace log, use the page.trace.write and page.trace.warn methods. The only difference between the two is that messages sent with the warn method are shown in red. Close your web browser now and close Visual Studio. You've now completed Lesson 5.10, Enable Tracing.